So we'll dive straight into it, knowing we've got 30 minutes. Chevaan, I'll come to you first. You are on my right. So also, he's got a bit of a problem with his throat, so please bear with him. He's not been feeling too well. What is audience first news? When we talk about audience first, what is it? Because we were talking about news avoidance some time back. Now we're talking about audience first.
Thank you, Indra. Yeah, my throat sounds really bad. What happens in Bangkok stays in Bangkok. So, look, what we're doing here is incredibly important. We are here for people. And news means freedom. I think that is the fundamental principle which we need to understand. And so, where our audience is where we should be. And I think it is time that we reframe the very idea of news, the very idea of news. We've drawn a periphery around news for decades, and we are struggling to remain within that periphery because the rest of the world, frankly, has moved on. And we're terrified of things like AI because we've not, taken any kind of tectonic shift in the idea of news for maybe the past several decades. So the idea really is to move from 0 to 1, if it were. It is an idea where you take the fundamental understanding of news and move it beyond simply reporting the news. If you think about industries that have been completely upended, examples such as Airbnb, Uber, SpaceX, what they've done is create markets that never existed before. And that is the opportunity that exists for news because of one really important factor. News has the trust of the people. If you have the commodity of trust, and if politicians don't have that trust anymore, then you have an obligation to use the platform and the power you have to move beyond simply reporting. And I think the discussion then has to move on from not just the future of news, but is news really the future?
By the way, the floor is also open for this panel. If you have any questions, please feel free to raise your hand and we'll get you involved in it as well. Now, Matt, we've all gone down that path. Well, most broadcasters, a majority that we speak to, it's all about audience, because if we don't give what the audience wants, we are losing them. The question then arises, is this a challenge for us as broadcasters to capture audience for all our hard work that we're putting in, day out?
Absolutely, because if we're not relevant and people don't see our stories, what is the point of us existing? Our job is not to suddenly become full of the news of the Kardashians every day, not to become clickbait. It's about understanding what are people wanting from us. We have a pretty good idea of what our traditional audiences want from us. What's been the real challenge is understanding what younger audiences want digital savvy audiences want. And if you don't go out and find that out and talk to people, you are never going to compete when there is so much content out there. When you're up against something like Netflix or Paramount or Prime, we can't compete with them for entertainment. We can compete on compelling, human-driven stories that make a difference to people's lives. And our mantra at the ABC now is journalism with impact. Stories that impact on people's lives, that bring about change, that give people a feeling of connectedness and a reason for hope. And that's a really important thing to do.
Now, Suvita, you deal with a lot of young people, you deal with a lot of the social media influencers, and these are people that nowadays people would take to before they take to the news channel. How much of an impact have they made, from your point of view, for news channels and broadcasters to say, hey, hold on, we're losing our audiences to the new group of people, and we need to quickly get back on track?
Well, I guess, first off, I'm really excited to be even included in this, panel, because we have been working with, creators, content creators, for more than 10 years. Just our initiatives ourselves are, registered with about 100,000 individuals. So it's a very exciting landscape. So coming to that questions, I think a lot of people think, we're losing, journalism is losing audience to the creators, content creators, and content creators, are mainly, about fast content, right? But right now, for instance, in countries like Thailand, Southeast Asia, we have a lot of like news individual that are producing content on social media, on like TikTok, on Twitter, as we know. And we see exciting collaborations between like news company that allows these individuals to be, free in that space. And it's a collaboration between news company and this, individuals that are actually part of the news company. Yeah, so we're working a lot with that space. And, to extend that, there are also like educators, there are, like people with engineering background that are creators to help reshape like the very education, phase in Thailand. So just my 2 cents for now.
Perfect. I'll come back to you with a couple more questions later. Hojoon, you're a pretty young, vibrant person out of Korea, reporter at KBS. Now, they say that we've gone down this path of audience-first news because that's what the young audience want. What's the feel like in where you come from?
There's a good question, and young people don't have any interest in news, especially. It's a fact, but when they face the new circumstances related to themselves, they got interested in the news. Can I have video? Is a good example. I will show you.
KBS와 연세대 연구팀이 합동 추적한 결과 사기 조직과 연계된 것으로 보이는 악성 임대인 176명의 존재를 최초로 확인했습니다.
전국의 빌라왕들이 몇 명이나 되는지 추적했습니다. 먼저 국토교통부 건축물 대장에서 50채 이상 가진 다주택 임대인을 추렸습니다.
Kind of, rental housing fraud in South Korea last year. We are reporting
이들
about
중에
it.
같은 건물 빌라나 오피스텔을 나눠 산 임대인들을 선별했습니다. 이렇게 완성한 연결망입니다.
It's a map we invented.
누군지 살펴봤더니 지난해 말 전세 사기에 사회적 관심이 쏠리게 한 숨지 빌라왕들 여기다 있습니다.
We picked
현재
out
당국이 전세 사기 혐의로 수사 중인 빌라왕
176
24명
evil
전부
landlords,
이 안에
ill
있습니다.
intention homeowner in cheaper apartment
최소
area
14명,
in South
최대
Korea.
148명과 같은 빌라 건물을 나눠 샀습니다.
다주택 임대인들 사이의 연결고리가 분명치 않습니다. 2019년 중심이 뚜렷이
We
형성되기
use social
시작합니다.
network
여러
analysis
임대인이
tool.
같은
We made
빌라
a map.
건물을 나눠 산 거래량이 늘었다는 뜻입니다.
The thicker the
176명
line
가운데
is, lines
주택도시
are, the
보증공사가 악성
stronger their
임대인으로 분류한
relationships
인물은
are.
50명에 불과합니다. 나머지 126명은 관리 대상도 아닙니다.
전세 사기 조직과
So
깊은
we
연관이 있는
reported
악성 임대인
about estimate of
176명은
the
어디에
amount
집을
of
소유하고
damage.
있을까요?
It's a
총 2만 6천여 채가
1.3
수도권을
billion
중심으로
dollars
전국에 흩어져 있습니다.
as a fraud.
2018년부터 집중적으로 매입을 시작해 2021년에
So, if we could just put
8,900여
the
채로
volume down for
정점을
that.
찍은
So,
뒤
just
사기
coming
피해
back to you on
추정액은
this,
최대 1조
is this
8,500억 원이
something that
넘습니다.
entices the young people to see and say, hey, it's what I want to see on television?
Yeah, but most of victims are people under 40.
Right.
It's a younger generation because this kind of fraud happen in the cheaper apartment, but newlywed couples and beginners cannot afford standard types of apartment or deluxe type apartment. They should live in the cheaper apartment. And ill-intentioned homeowner manipulate the system error. So most of them are younger generations. So when we report about it, many young generation or young people comment about it. And this kind of, this series, the reporting series went viral so much in South Korea.
Now, Matt, I come back to you. You at the ABC, very particular about how you do things. And when you try to do things like putting audience first, have you got it wrong, or is there a chance of getting it wrong?
I think, no, I think where we got it wrong was when we weren't talking to audiences. In 2019, we had a national election, and the ABC and every other media organisation completely misread what was going to happen. The polls were wrong, our coverage was wrong, we all incorrectly predicted the outcome because we weren't talking to people enough outside our traditional audience about what was happening in the country. In 2022, we flipped that, and it was all about old-fashioned journalism, freeing reporters up, getting them out of the newsroom, onto the streets, in the outer suburbs, in our country towns, and saying, what are the things that are important to you? We started collating all of that information in databases. We did audience call-outs for inviting the community to tell us what were the issues important to them. We invited the community to come to roundtable discussions with journalists to talk to us about the issues that mattered. And that was how we made the decisions around the stories we commissioned leading up to the 2022 election. They were driven by people, not by politicians talking about what they wanted to talk about. We could put the hard questions to politicians about the things the audience wanted to know about, and we got it so much more on the money. The audience engagement was so much higher, and there's still work to do, but that's now what underpins our whole strategy. If we don't get our reporters back on the streets, when I started 3 decades ago, that was our daily mission, was to go and talk to people. We're trying to retrain our journalists now about how to do that. But at the core of it is old-fashioned journalism. Talk to people, find out what matters to them. There's your story. And that's what we're trying to get back to. And it's working more and more. We're doing fewer stories, but we're doing them better. And that is really resonating with audiences.
So quality over quantity, of course. Matt, I think when we talk to a lot of newsrooms and news heads in particular, they talk about lazy journalism as well. Some come into it for maybe different reasons rather than pure passion of journalism. Now, that brings me to Sri Lanka a couple of years ago with everything that happened in Sri Lanka. What was it like seeing the journalists go onto the streets, and talk to the people and report amid the crisis? How was it, and what was the response from audiences for those coverages across the board in Sri Lanka?
Yeah, it was quite an experience for us, obviously, because it's something we hadn't seen before in Sri Lanka. But I think what's important also is here to discern the reporting on the crisis, the economic crisis itself, and reporting on all of the signs that were visible in plain sight for years. All of the politicians that we probably didn't call out, or we did call out, and the people weren't able to discern the difference between what was right and wrong. And I think both for Sri Lankan media organizations as well as the people, it was a time of reckoning, where the importance of the truth, and sometimes the truth isn't easy to digest. I was listening to some of the panels this morning, and there was lots of effort in trying to sugarcoat the truth. It's impossible. It's not possible. Sometimes we have to go to a doctor and the medicine is truly bitter. Surgery isn't something any of us look forward to, but it is essential. And when you're dealing with the truth, there's only one way to deal with it head on. And I think that's what we continue to do in Sri Lanka, because we have a lot of work to do. It is a beautiful island with so much of potential, but it's been ruined by decades of political corruption and incompetence. And so dealing with that kind of situation, through the platform of news, when you're putting forward the truth, is quite complex. And the way to do it today, because news, in a sense, has also been democratized, Indra. Everybody with a mobile phone has not just the ability to become a reporter, but also access to reports. And so with that connection, you then have to not just sit in your ivory tower and report, but as Matt quite rightly said, head down to the people, move with the people, and most importantly, listen to the people. And you can't listen to the people on a digital device. You have to be in front of them, face to face.
Most definitely, that is what true journalism is about. Now, coming to you, Suvita, what Chevaan just said, maybe I could be wrong, but 5, 10, maybe in the last 10 years, we've seen journalism hit, some would say, very low periods of quality that was coming out. Have content creators given media houses a bit of a shock and a bit of that, jump start that they needed to get back to what Matt's saying, the good old-fashioned journalism?
Definitely. I work with a lot of young people, and I've seen them, themselves, like within 5 years, they become like small media company, right? So they become themselves, like now they have like news unit within themselves and learn about, the journalism, the classic journalism. And, talking, they're very digitized, but in fact, like what Matt and Chevaan said is so true. It's all about, getting, yourself out there and really talk to the people, right? I mean, these are, the examples of like people that, we've just like collaborated without any sequences, but we see that, these people are the very face of the landscape that we're talking about. And they are actually, very digitized, but what they do every day is going out, talking to people, because even themselves are now like a small entity and they need to do fact checks. But the flexibility of being like very independent allows them to be, kind of like the helping hand, the scouting tools for big news houses. Like I work with, at least 10,000 of them to do, to report fact-checking facts, tips back to the news houses. Yeah, so that's what we encourage every day. Have you done, these kind of standards? Yeah, and our initiatives right now are actually also trying to certify them as becoming, like small journalism. Yeah, so that's very important because there's a lot of noise out there. There's a lot of, misinformation out there. It's a scary world.
Now, coming to, again, I'm bringing you again from a perspective of digital, and Asia is renowned to be the leaders in digital development. Once it started going, we spoke about citizen journalism, etc. earlier on, but every young person now has sort of become a content creator in one way or the other, be it entertainment, be it somebody skateboarding somewhere, or be it someone just walking on a rope for having fun. But that sort of become more, the appetite is growing. Will you agree with that statement?
Yeah, it's a good question. Nowadays, people are watching a lot of entertainment things than news or document. But we need to keep up with the new waves, new phenomenon. Can I have a picture? There's another example of investigative journalism at KBS. In 2019, we report about Korean spy who worked for Japanese colonial government. The point is, the team care about the new phenomenon. People prefer watching documentary on Netflix, not TV set. So the team worried a lot, and they recruited younger generation staff. And they even hire voice or sounds director who had worked in entertainment field to keep up with the new waves. So after reporting, a lot of people, especially younger generation, comment that it's very interesting, even though the topic is historical. Yeah, that's the way we have to keep up with the new wave.
Matt, in Australia and the Pacific Islands, including New Zealand, what's the way from your expertise? What do you think the audience want more of nowadays? Is it good, old, well-researched story, or is it some fun fact, unresearched piece that would gain more traction?
No, I think it's about knowing what your remit is, depending on who you are, and that's the sort of content. For us, it's very important that we maintain trust, as we've heard, but also maintain the quality of our journalism. We want to be on those platforms, and people know that if they see it's from us, they can trust it. And so the storytelling has to have integrity. But that doesn't mean we tell it in the boring, old, worthy way of the ABC. We need to tell it in an engaging way that fits the platform, make sure it's fit for purpose. For us, it's been about thinking about, well, who is the audience on this platform that dictates how we will tell this story. And trying to find your authentic voice in that space as a big media company is actually really challenging, particularly when it's more driven by personality. But we are having success because I think the space we're also playing in is breaking news is everywhere. Where we can bring value is with the context and the nuance to say, okay, so what does this mean and what might happen next? And that's where audiences will really respond.
And I would like to add here that, in the last 2-3 years, the ABC has broken some of the biggest stories in the Pacific Islands from a very different perspective compared to because of the problems the Pacific media have faced. Is that something that is right up there of the changing landscape?
Yeah, absolutely, because we have this very privileged position, as Nezrin said before, where we're protected by an Act of Parliament. We do have international reach, and we pride ourselves on the journalism. We've had Pacific media houses, not you, Indra, but others say, we need the ABC in the region because you can tell the stories we can't. But we have to do that. In the Pacific, the audience is on Facebook. They're not necessarily listening to us on Radio Australia or on Instagram or coming to our website. So we have to be on Facebook. We have to be trying to talk to people there. That's where we get our biggest traction. But we have to think about how do we sound, how do we look on those platforms.
Now, Chevaan, yes, it's all fine. We got to change stuff. We got to produce things that our audience wants because we want the eyes back. We want the advertising dollars in. But the catch is, it does cost money to get all those things done. And if revenue is not flowing in as, companies want, that does pose a challenge.
It's a challenge of leadership. It's not a challenge of news or journalism. It's a challenge of leadership. And I think, opportunity always comes disguised as hard work. So this question doesn't arise in my mind because if you're innovating and if you're leading as you should be, and if you recognize that it's time news must change and must be engaged with communities in ways other than simply reporting news. For example, you must be building bridges for people. You have to be involved in rural infrastructure. You have to be doing things that educate your communities on things like geopolitics, helping them make sense of things like that, so that you're creating a more wholesome community and a more wholesome society. If you're doing the right things and if you're leading as you should be, then I think the question of revenue doesn't arise. It is a question of making the most of this incredible opportunity we have with these incredible new tools and weaponry that we can use to engage with audience. I think that's the kind of news leadership that we really need for the future.
Excellent. Any questions from the floor for our panelists? No? Everyone's tired?
Indra, sorry, one more point is that I think we need to change our perception of what news is, because our audience's view of news is very, very different. And what we think of as fluff or fashion or entertainment, they still see as news content. And we, I think, have been stuck in the mindset of news is serious. And it doesn't mean that if there's an earthquake where hundreds of people are dead, that you're suddenly still smiling when you tell that story on Instagram. But it means we need to think more cleverly about what we think of news and how we tell it.
Just giving an example of where I come from, we started an entertainment section in a major news bulletin every night. It's not so because we wanted to, but we researched and the demand is there. People want to know what Justin Bieber is doing, People want to know what our local singers are doing this week. And that has got more traction on Facebook when we put it out there than most of the other political stories. So that brings me to my next question, my final one for you this afternoon. Facebook and other social media platforms in and around Asia and the world have taken off in the last couple of years or a few years. Do you think that traditional broadcasters still have a chance based on the experience of working with those who are creating content for socials, etc.?
Definitely, and absolutely. And answering this quickly, but I also have questions for us all. I don't need the slides, thank you. Yeah. I think even more so with the things that are going on right now, the AI regulation hasn't been, really strongly established. We are in a big chaos right now, and we need the trust factor And these trust factors are actually coming from journalism, right? So social media out there, the platforms that we're trying to work with, even, like social media, like what do you call it, authority to kind of like, help us do fact checking. So even, small initiatives like us are, crying out for help with them. Yeah, so, but the future is definitely, circles around trust. And I have a little bit of a question myself when you ask, like if the audience have some questions. I think we can kind of like, get from the conversation that has been going around today that we need to collaborate, right? Like news houses need to collaborate with the communities. One quick question for us all and also for you, Indra. Like how do you see this happening? Like, what are you guys doing right now in collaboration with the communities?
I was talking to Matt and I think Chevaan earlier on and a couple of other people. We've had too many of these. We sit down, we talk, we go back, we come back 1 year later, we sit down, we talk again. Are we really actioning what we are preaching? Because if we're not, we are losing our audience and we are responsible for it. Let's not blame the audience. Let's blame ourselves. Let's blame each and every individual in newsrooms and media houses. So that's my take. And I'm a very firm believer that when we do too much of this, and if you keep on doing it every time and not going back and actioning it, we are losing it big time.
I think it's about partnering with the right people, putting the right people together, that we can have faith in their editorial standards that will align with what we do. We have run talent funds where we reach out to influencers to invite them to collaborate with us, to bring them in, to try to work with them. It's had mixed success, but I think that is a really important way forward.
To prepare the discussion, I interviewed more than 20 people. The former leader of investigative journalism team at KBS, he said to me, there's no content which targeted specific generation or ages on purpose, but if we report something very useful or relevant to specific ages, they try to get interested in contents which we made. So content is so important. A platform, we should keep up with the new wave of platform. So the problem is content, what content is, not platform.
You can still hear. Your voice sounds good. I still can.
I think you're absolutely right. I think collaboration is the key to move forward, and we have the opportunity to do that. And look, the major topic today has been AI. And it's really important that we take a deep dive into exactly what we're talking about here, okay? The processing power required to make AI ubiquitous is enormous, and years and years in the future, okay? We're going to be experiencing the incremental advantages of AI, I think, for several years to come, which will be fantastic. But there's no way on God's earth, mathematically, that AI can replace this man next to me with 3 decades of journalism experience. The nuances, the experience, the wisdom that this kind of journalist comes with is not going to be replaced by a computer that essentially depends on data that is already inserted into the internet, and all of the data in the world is not on the internet. It is a very small percentage of it. So let's get that into perception in the first place and understand what a massive responsibility we all have as journalists, as news leaders to our societies and communities.
I think that's some very fantastic insight by the 4 panelists, ladies and gentlemen. A big round of applause for all of them. As we wrap up this afternoon for this session, I think the takeaway from here is, are we going to action what we're discussing? Are we going to take a deep dive? Are we going to look at the future of news, combine it with AI, look at the positives, and come out better and make our newsrooms go better? Let's not blame social media, etc. all the time. Let's look at our own selves as well. Thank you very much for your attention. Very good afternoon, guys.
Thank you very much, Indra.